Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So today, it's funny that Timothy and I are finally on this call because we've been like indirect social friends for it seems like half a decade, and I'm talking about like the caliber of friends that we're overlapping in this circle are like if they're not $1 million earners, they're definitely on their way, and they're highly educated individuals. And the crazy thing is, a lot of them are African American as well too. So we have like Greg Caesar as an overlap. We have Ty Cohen as an overlap, just to
Yep.
kind of name some people. So like this interview is not only well deserved, but it's well overdue to say the least, right?
Appreciate
So
it.
so with this, I like to get forward from interviewing with a particular nickname. So the nickname I'm going to give this bad dude is the Swift Doctor Boss, and we're going to break that apart, right? So
Love it.
so the Swift is associated to his radio podcast. And believe it or not, this man is also a doctor and he does not live it up. So I'm going to live it up for him today.
Ah, to be doctor. Still got a couple of years to go.
Okay.
Thank you for that though. Thank you for the flowers, but a little too soon. A little too soon.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, technically speaking, like we just dive into this, right? I mean, even though that you're now getting like the doctor tag,
Yes.
your education history is pretty deep. I mean, you've had
Yes.
a lot of education in a lot of different things. So, like, let's talk about that. You're a lifelong learner. My first question is why? Because that's not for everyone.
I love it. And I'm breaking a cardinal rule in radio or podcasting of saying that's a good question. You're never supposed to say that. Um, so, but it is a good question though. For me, it's kind of strange. Like growing up in a Caribbean household,
Mhm.
you're told to always study your books, and I'm not going to do the Trini accent or anything like that here, but you're told to study your books because education is key. Education is the thing, the foundation. No one can ever take it away from you, all that type of stuff. So special thanks to my grandmother, rest in peace, my mother. They instilled in me
Mhm.
education first above everything. But then with that foundation, I also just loved learning new things. I'm only child introvert, even though I'm extroverted in personality, and I was always surrounded around books. And so, if there was something new I could learn to do, I would just go out and hit the library and find a book on it, and then do the thing, and then I find something else to learn to do, and it just kept growing with me. And the funny thing about that is that led into my online career, my offline career, and who I am today. I'm excited to know things and excited to give that information and that perspective to other people. So that's kind of the core of why I am the way I am when it comes to this whole, you know, education learning thing. I'm excited for knowledge.
Mhm.
Schoolhouse Rock is one of my favorite things, if that makes perspective of everything. So yeah, I like to learn.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So if you're listening to this and you're actually watching the video, I think like if you're looking at both of us, we both wear hats. We're both like light skinned. We both have beards. We both have glasses. And it's kind of like I really want to dive into this. And believe it or not, we're both descendants of Trinidad and Tobago. So like that's
Nice.
kind of like a little bit on the creepy side, right? To say the least. So we
I
probably need to
love
check
it.
some ancestry a little bit
Oh,
after
that'd be fun.
that would definitely be fun. So I'm really happy that you brought up Antoinette, your grandmother. I mean, you guys just celebrated her 10th year of her passing, and she was like like the pinnacle of your family. So I want you to kind of talk about her, like how did she really instill like education through you and through your mom, and what was she like?
Anetta Ebaird. Um, she was the monarch of our family. Um, she'd be the first person that anyone coming from Trinidad and Tobago to go to her house before they go anywhere else. Like if someone was on their way to Canada, they got to stop in DC and they got to go to my grandmother's house first. It's just you got to visit the queen. Um, she was a cool person. Um, kind-hearted, um, salt of the earth. give the shirt off her back type person, like really giving. And I think she gave me a lot of my core behavior. Like I can attribute a lot of the things of the way I think and the way I do because of her. And um, yeah, she's sorely missed.
Mhm.
But yeah, she was just one of the great blessings in my life and for many other people that she's touched. Um, yeah, one of the greatest people I've ever known.
And so, I mean, obviously, her byproduct was, I'm going to name her L Boogie, right? So I'm talking about your mom, right? So, like your mom, she is a living, breathing organism by herself. I mean, she's a world
Yeah.
traveler. She does a lot of different things. She's highly educated as well. So,
Yes.
being that your grandmother raised her, how was it being raised by someone who was that driven and that educated?
Uh, I'd have to say is interesting because and I'm almost certain you can identify with this too. Culturally, it's a culture shock when you're looking at the American culture versus Caribbean culture, and she navigated those waters really, really well. Um, there was things that she had to learn on the fly that helped to kind of guide my way through like the tribulation of being in DC in the 80s and things like that. Um, all I could say is like I can't think of anybody else in my life that has shown me the the skill of being adaptable
Mm,
as well as she had. Um, and I'm gonna call her El Boogie as soon as we get off this call. So um, yeah, she's an amazing person.
mm,
She works really hard and she deserves everything that she's earned in life. Um, and she's one of those people that doesn't get the credit for
mm,
doing all the great things that she's done, myself included. So I'm making sure she's gonna watch this so that way she has it on record that I said it. But yeah, nah, she's a great mom,
mm,
and she's put in the work to deserve
mm.
her title. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the reason why I took this path as far as starting off the interview was kind of like behind every great man, there's always a great woman, right? And in your
Yes.
case, there's multiple. We're talking about your grandmother, your mother, which then leads me to I can go back to her maiden name, Miss Holmes, right? So talking about your wife, who is just as intelligent, intellectual, and highly educated as yourself. So it's like not only did you marry your grandmother, your mother, but you also married your equal. What is that like?
uh Man, it's been a while since I had this good of an interview. I had to give it to you, man. You're digging in there. I love it. So Miss Tanisha Holmes Craggette. Uh, she is she's beyond words.
Hmm,
I met her in high school, the fabulous Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Um, and high school sweethearts.
mm,
She's one of those people when you when you know and you know,
mm,
I knew.
mm,
And I was like, it's funny story with that. Um, when I met Tunisia, um, and I just kind of internalized her as being the one, I took my mother out to lunch and I was like, I gotta tell you something.
mm.
I know who I'm gonna marry.
Wow.
This is who she is. That speaks to the volume of caliber of her character. And if I can just kind of like one plus that, the like just how she thinks is so unique. Her way of conceptualizing things keeps me
Mhm,
going. It keeps me wanting to be better.
mhm,
And when you're lucky enough to marry that person that elevates you, you can never be a person that settles, and she
Mm,
doesn't allow me to settle at all. Those are characters that I saw in her early as a teenager, and now we're over 20 years in
mm.
this. And yeah, Miss Holmes um is she's a gem. She's a diamond in the rough.
Yeah, I think just by doing my due diligence and looking into her and looking into your history, it was like, I wouldn't say you guys were competing, but it was like every accomplishment, another accomplishment. It was like always, there's never like, put it like this, in your household, I don't see when you guys are not celebrating. Like, when do you guys not celebrate? Because you guys are always achieving something.
It's funny. She doesn't compete, but I do.
Mm,
So the gamer aspect in me, the competitor in me, was competing against her because she's so accomplished. Um, like she was a salutatorian in high school. She got her degree before I did. Um, uh, when we were working in the government, she had more opportunities than I did. Um, she didn't care about where I was in life in any of that stuff. But for me, I'm like, I can't measure down to her. I got to measure up to her.
yeah.
If she elevates me, what's it going to look like if I downgrade her?
Mm,
So I had to measure up. And that's where that kind of like stepped in. And I think the apex of all of that was us deciding to get our masters together
mm,
at our alma mater, Full Sail University, um, and us being able to walk together. So
yeah.
the answer of celebration, I had to say we celebrate each other's wins all the time,
Mm,
because we both know the hard work that goes into it, and we're each other's biggest cheerleaders
mm,
for achieving our goals.
mm.
So I think that's the way I could answer that. Like, yes, we do celebrate each other, but it's mostly a sigh of relief because of all the work that goes into it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely is great because I mean, obviously they say opposites attract. So like I want to kind of talk about that because like my wife, she's my opposite. And my wife happens, her birthday is essentially 3 days before your wife. It's September 21st, right?
Yeah.
So she's a Libra. So like this is kind of going back to us being Trinidad, us looking the same. Like, what is your zodiac sign? Like, when is your birthday? If your birthday is even close to mine, like we're in a
We were
simulation. No
separated
question.
at birth.
Yeah, we're definitely in a simulation. So
Uh, so she's a Pisces, actually. She's
okay.
March. And I'm a Scorpio. I'm November. So in looking up both the zodiac there and the Chinese zodiac, um, we both are matches.
Mhm,
So with her, um, she's the one that's level-headed and does her best to keep equilibrium. She tries to keep balance. That's her nature. Me, I'm adventurous. I'm a risk taker. And in that, that's where we counterbalance each other. Like she keeps me on focus.
mhm,
I get her out of her comfort zone.
mhm,
And in that, we can find our adventures in between
mhm,
where there's things that I might want to do that she might feel is a bit too risky,
mhm,
but she will find where she's comfortable in it so she could experience more life.
mhm,
On the other side of things, she may be really, really conservative about something, and it has me to think about what's the consequences. And so she keeps me in check
mhm.
by giving me more things to consider as we go through like decision making. So that's kind of like where we counterbalance each other.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, and to your point, in my memory, because I have like I try to keep a database of information at the tip of my fingertips. And in reality, I think your mom's birthday is September
You
24th.
got it.
Wow. Got it.
Yes.
So collectively with all this, right? I mean, obviously you had an opportunity to dive into multiple different industries
Yes.
collectively because you have a design background, you have an education background. So I want you to kind of go back to the early days. And you brought up Duke earlier. Like you worked at
Yes.
Duke as well. You went to school there. Like, what is it about that core function that is part of who you are right now that you're still tapping into that environment?
Oh, it's the arts, definitely. So the one blessing I can take from Ellington was being creative.
Mm,
And it's more than just being creative as an artist, it's being creative in life, is being able to analyze and critique, take hard criticism, but bounce back from it with new ideas, new inspirations, new focus to ever evolve, ever change, become something that someone never even seen before. That's creativity. And Ellington instilled that not just in me, not just in Tunisia, but for all of my brothers and sisters from Ellington, past, present, and current, future. Um, it's that core, it's that core tenet of expression, creativity, knowing oneself.
mhm,
I've been able to have that thread in every single thing I've done throughout my life, thanks to Ellington. And I never regretted a day ever being there. Um, Throughout my career, there's always been something where if there's a problem, there's a solution. In between that is figuring it out. And that's where the creativity comes in.
mm, mm. So, I mean, I think obviously you're talking about left brain and right brain, right? I mean, and I always talk about this on this show, like I know who I am. Like I'm equally yoked between like one hemisphere and the other hemisphere. They work with each other. Sometimes they argue, and then we work out and we come
Mhm.
out better in the end. So you found that equilibrium as well, because again, you're highly intellectual, but you're also very, very creative as well.
Yes.
So with that, how are you utilizing that creativity in your education platforms? Because that's really where you make your money. Like you're helping, you're educating, you're coaching. How does that creativity fall into that?
Thankfully, as an instructional designer, as an educator, I've had the foundational aspect of pedagogy and adagogy, um, where you understand how people think
Mm,
and you understand how people learn and you understand how to tap into these multiple modalities in order for there to be knowledge transfer. The difficult part for me in my early part of my career was understanding that there are no levels to human intelligence.
mm,
Meaning, if someone is a doctor, they're just as intelligent as a 3-year-old kid at their core. They may have more experience, they may have more life, they may have more knowledge, they may have more degrees, whatever. At the core, there's still the tenets of how someone learns that encapsulates how you teach and train.
mhm,
And so that foundation came later in life, and it took time for me to develop my unique way of doing it. Um, I have to say, when I was working for the National Institutes of Health and I was an IT trainer for scientists, PhDs, that's when I honed my skill.
mhm,
And that's around the time that I broke out from the government and went into the online world, thanks to my mentor, Stukes. If you're watching, thank you so much. Um, Understanding the technical aspect of how to teach and train, and then understanding the monetary aspect of how to sell information, those worlds collided. And it happened in 2012. That's when I really got my footing
mhm,
into this world of professional development, but in an entrepreneurial position.
mhm,
Those two things came together when I was able to understand how to teach and train and understand how to move content as a tangible, intangible product.
mm.
That's probably the way that I could express that.
So I think this is a real good gateway to. It was a particular episode with you and your wife on your opinion stinks podcast,
Mhm.
and you guys were talking about marketers that kind of come across with the always be selling mindset,
Yeah.
always be trying to do conversions and close the deal. And you were referencing, I think, a call that you had, and someone asked you like, "Why didn't you close me?" And you were so I want you to kind of go into that, because I mean exactly what you just said about understanding the principles of education. You also understand the creativity, you understand the psychology behind it. I want you to kind of talk to the listeners and unpack why always selling may not be the best tactic to use.
So I had a really good guest on the Swick show. Um, and I'm sorry that I'm blanking his name, but I remember his book. It's What to Say. It's How to Say It. I can't remember, but I will try to pull it up while we're talking. Um, what to say, when to say it. It was something around there. Okay. Either way. Um, a brilliant part of the conversation came to distilling it this way. Do you know the best time to ask a girl out on a date?
Mm,
And the answer is when it's the right time.
mm,
That's basically what that is for me. It's, you know, when the right time is the right time to engage in a conversation where you're trying to move someone to a sale. And from my past experience and like what I instill today, there's no need to rush,
mm,
because when the moment is right, the moment is right. And too many people, when like looking at some people's sales cycles and such, the conventional wisdom is you're always asking for it. You're always trying to get it, because if you're not moving someone to a buying decision, then you lost the sale and they lost an opportunity to XYZ. That's not true.
mm,
Um, we're in this environment socially where our engagement cycle has increased. And, you know, what used to be what, 7 touch points is now maybe 17,
mm,
maybe even 22. It really depends on the niche, the market, where someone is emotionally, financially, spiritually, whatever factors. So that was the crust of that particular statement. It was, there has to be a certain level of empathy
mhm,
to understand where someone is, and meeting them is no different than in education. There's many different ways to present an idea, but when it's the right time, it's the right time.
mm. So I mean that leads me into like there's always this nuance of education, right? There's theory-based education based upon the principles, but they're more so, developing that content versus applying that content.
Yes.
You had made a statement, and I think it was like one of your quotes, and you said, "Men lie, women lie, but the numbers don't."
Numbers don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want you to kind of like talk about that, because I mean, obviously, there's colleges out there that are 100% driven on, we're going to teach you the philosophy of this content, but we're
Yes.
not going to teach you how to sell it or use it or even do anything in the real world with it. And you're
Yes.
you're in between both. You understand both equally. So I want you to kind of talk about like how does that statement roll into that equation about the numbers not aligning but applying those numbers.
Absolutely. Perfect example. Colleges right now are experiencing a hiring deficiency when it comes to educators. You're seeing that many of the colleges right now are not growing. There's some schools that are closing because tuition is down. Gen Z, new founders, um, they're not going to schools because they're going to put themselves in debt, and they're more financially conscious. So taking that into the perspective, what you're realizing at this point is real world knowledge is is exceeding institutional knowledge.
Mhm.
And the competition between trying to teach someone or train someone in a practical skill versus a a skill that may promise a pathway to a career is being challenged by society. Now we take that perspective into the entrepreneurial space. And we're seeing the same exact thing. We're at the point where anyone can call themselves a coach, a consultant, some type of subject matter expert, some type of leader. And it's never been simpler
Mm-hmm.
to just turn on a camera, get a microphone, hell, use your phone
Mm-hmm.
and create content. And then now you are a subject matter expert. But how many other people are doing exactly the same thing? Because now the model has been proven. It's the whole thing of market sophistication. And it's happening in traditional education and new world education. People are just getting wiser and becoming more skeptic,
Mm-hmm.
and they have more skepticism. So again, that kind of goes back into the whole thing of touch points, because if someone isn't as sophisticated, you might be able to move them to a decision in 2 conversations. But if they are more sophisticated, that 2 can turn into 22.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the correlation between those things. It's people are just smarter now. It's not like the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
We're in 2024. So that's kind of the way I look at it.
So, I mean, obviously, even though that you have that state of mind and you're a course creator and you've won awards for this, I kind of want to kind of dive into your book. And it was a section in your book that was very relevant to what we're talking about. And it was this one little, like a little image that you had, and it resonated with me really, really, really hard. And I was, okay, I'm going to bring that up. And the resonation of it was like, love,
I
buy,
repeat.
repeat framework.
Mhm.
So in that state of mind, based upon what you just said, how does that framework relate to today's demographic of individuals that are not from the 1930s, when they're subjective to being put in the classrooms and being very linear, step and repeat? They're more organic. How does that step and repeat framework work for them?
So over the years of being an online entrepreneur, that framework kind of came into view
Mm-hmm.
from building like many of the gurus, like back ends. And the challenge for me was trying to encapsulate a grand idea on a sheet of paper, understanding that, and just kind of giving a little background for everybody, that the idea of uh, know, like, and trust is an archaic framework.
Mm.
And that stems from, again, the whole thing of multiple touch points. So when I developed Like, Love, Buy, Repeat, I conceptualize the new buyer's journey, the cycle, where we have to think more socially. That's where like kind of comes in.
Mm-hmm.
We have to give before receiving. That's where love comes in. We have to make recommendations rather than offers.
Mm-hmm.
That's where buy comes in. And then we have to keep them in our ecosystem. So then we become top of mind. That's where repeat comes in. So the idea is always having something we can invite someone to,
Mm-hmm.
always giving them something for them to think of us, always showing that we care, and always coming from a place of authority of giving a recommendation when the time is right.
Think it's very interesting to me the way you break it down like that. Because I mean, obviously, most people, they don't think like that. Like, prime example, me and my wife, like we had this conversation, and she's more so, I want to see the results, but
Mm-hmm.
the journey to get to the results is where she kind of like disconnects. For me, I'm all about the journey. Like, I want to be able to have the connecting points, so when I get the results, then I can tell the story of how I got the results.
Right. Scientific method.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of that collectively being part of who you are, I want you to kind of articulate just by using 3 to 5 words to define you. Like, pretend if I was searching through Google and if you were keyword SEO optimized, which 3 to 5 words I will be able to find you if I put those words in.
Oh man. See, the worst thing about that question is I know which words you could use and you would find my father rather than me.
Mm.
Um let's see. Uh Man, that's a good one. Wisdom, innovation, systems, experimentation. I think of a fifth one. Okay, I'm gonna steal and say phrase instead of a word. Conduit of change.
Hmm. Hmm. I could definitely see that. And I mean, kind of going back to wisdom. So for those that are looking, if you kind of look at his hat, if you look at his background, I mean, obviously the owl is a symbol of
Of
wisdom.
wisdom. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's a telltale, right, of wisdom. But I really want you to kind of define why did you choose it, besides it just being an iconic thing for wisdom.
Education. It comes back to my roots.
Mhm.
So this is a good story. When I was younger, I didn't have many friends. Being again with the cultural shift of being in a Trinity home in the US world, they're still trying to understand the dynamics of how you integrate socially.
Mhm.
So many of my relations early on were with people from Caribbean culture, and there wasn't really anyone to teach me how to play chess
Mhm.
because that wasn't really a common thing that you did. But there was a cousin of mine by the name of Wayne who bought me a small little chintzy magnetic black and white chess set and sat with me for hours teaching me the game of chess.
Mhm.
That moment in time has stuck with me from, I'm going to assume, 4 years old,
Mhm.
and I'm now 45 going on 46.
Mhm.
Wisdom, understanding the complexity of a game as like chess. It teaches you patience. It teaches you strategy. It teaches you focus. It teaches you many of the things that we now do as adults in a game.
Mhm.
And that type of wisdom has stuck with me.
Mhm.
It's the whole thing of knowledge is power. It taught me how to listen. It taught me how to think deeply, how to be critical, how to hone my skills as an intense thinker, how to articulate thoughts that are complex in simple ways, how to take complex ideas and distill it into um, manageable chunks for easy consumption. Like though it, and I can pinpoint that to a game.
Mhm.
So that's where wisdom kind of comes in. Like you never know where your source of inspiration or aspiration is going to come from, and is being able to reflect and internalize and then express it outwardly for the next generation or someone that needs it at a certain time to help them along and move them forward. Always moving people along and elevating. So that's where the wisdom part kind of comes in for me.
And I think based upon an answer, you had made a statement about, education or knowledge is power. Would you like that statement? I think is true, but it's partly true in the sense that I always say applied knowledge, because I mean you could have knowledge and people sit down and don't do anything with it. So what's your thoughts on that concept about applying the information that you're receiving and actually taking action and doing something with it?
I think it goes both ways. I don't think that having knowledge with no application is a weakness any more than having knowledge and applying knowledge is a strength,
Hmm.
because it's the whole thing of impact. That's probably the way I can express it. My great mentor, Ken MacArthur, he says that uh, we cause impact whether we want to or not. And the idea of that is whether you take action or take no action,
Hmm.
you're still causing impact. And so that's where knowledge kind of falls in. You can have knowledge, never apply it, but then when you need it, you can recall it. On the other hand, you can have knowledge, apply it, and cause a result. And it may be a positive or a negative.
Hmm.
Either way, knowledge is still being used. So I can't say that being book smart is any better than being street smart,
Yeah.
because it's smart nonetheless.
Mm,
So that's kind of where I am in it. I agree with your sentiment that applied knowledge has strength,
mm,
but I also feel that philosophers have done a really great job over the time that we've been humans on Earth, of having deep thought that
mm,
never had application, but is being used today for helping people to think critically.
mhm.
So that's kind of where I am.
So, I mean, going to the philosopher route, man, don't you think like their applied application was essentially infecting secondary generations past them to at least think about their philosophies and then take action for them versus them taking actions at that time?
But then the question there is, did they take any action?
Mm.
That's my point.
But they documented,
Because
right? Did
it,
they documented their philosophies? Isn't that a
not
form?
necessarily, we don't know that they did that. It could have been Johnny in the back of the room that was like, "Oh, Socrates, this is amazing. Let me get this down." I'm pulling hairs at this point,
Yeah.
but yeah, if someone took the time to document their thought, yeah, they did take an action. But we also know that in history there were oracles, not oracles, but orders,
Mhm,
that just spoke their thought, and there may or may not be a record of how that thought was recorded.
mhm,
We don't know if the person who spoke it wrote it, if they had an aide,
mhm,
if there was someone in the room who had that tablet and it was just chiseling away. Um, but it doesn't lessen the impact.
mhm,
So that goes back to, you know, having the knowledge. But I do hear what you're saying though. So
mhm,
in that, even speaking it is taking action.
mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tomato, tomato.
So, I mean, you've been on this journey for some time, right? I mean, obviously, being as educated as you are, and all the schools that you went to, and then applying that and utilizing it, the perception of you being an overnight success. Somebody may hear of you first time right now,
Yes.
but in reality, right? If we can kind of historically look at a timeline, how long did it take you to become who you are? Now, obviously, it took your entire life, but it was a time of a eureka moment that you woke up and you were aware, and you grew to who you are right now.
34 years. It took me 34 years. The reason I say 34, and actually I might be a little generous. Let's see. So 2012. However old I was in 2012. 2012 was when I launched my first information product on the internet.
Mm,
And I call that my tipping point. Because up to that point, I'd worked the regular jobs. I got into the government. I started out as an A plus certified uh, level one technician, information technician. Moved into training. I learned how to train, and then I went on this magical thing called the Warrior Forum, and I found this amazing little product called the 4 Hour Membership. It was Robert Stuke's information product based off of the whole thing of the craze of the 4 hour work week. I had a very little money in my pocket. I went and I spent the $7. And then there was the upgrade for $500 to get into the mastermind. And it's like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to get it, but I'll figure it out. And I figured it out, paid the 500, paid the 500. And in 2 weeks of being in that mastermind, when Stuke saw what I could do, his very first question to me was, why are you not in internet information marketing?
mm,
And my answer was, I didn't know it existed.
mm,
That was my tipping point.
mm,
Because again, when you don't know, you don't know.
mm,
And I love to learn because there's always something that might be able to help me in life. And I took a chance. I took imperfect action.
mm,
And that moment of faith in the process changed my whole trajectory in life. I think if that moment didn't happen, I probably would still be an underpaid, lesser educated government employee in the same position, with no chance of upward mobility, um, unless I went into education, which I would not have been able to afford to do.
Mm.
Um, and I would just be one of those cubicle employees
Mm.
and thinking this is my life.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that's a hell of a way of looking at things, right? And I'm going to ask you a question, and let's just get elephant out the room, right? Obviously,
Yep.
you're an African American, right? At
Yes.
this point in time in life,
Yes.
you think that it's let's say intimidating when someone finds out how educated you are. Like prime example, I'm looking at your name on the screen, and you have every abbreviation and every like shorthand, like I mean, almost an alphabet after your
I
name.
have an alphabet soup after my name. Yeah.
Right. So that by default, you're an overachiever. Is that something that you think is a cultural aspect of being an African American, being able to step into the market and prove who you are before you show them who you are? Or is it just more so you're addicted to education and that plays into it?
Uh, so I hate the term code switch, but I understand what code switch is, code switching. And the unfair thing about that term is that it denotes that someone is purposely trying to be something that they're not
Mm.
in order to be accepted. Being raised in a Caribbean household, I was surrounded by people that had English diction. So the country of England, because England did their thing in the colonies and the Caribbean and colonized and all that type of stuff. I had that as my foundation. So growing up, when my mom and I would go to grocery stores throughout DC, and they would hear me say please and thank you and hold the door for people and all this other type of stuff, you'd get comments like, oh, he must have a white daddy or something like that. Or how he talks so good. And I hate to even say it that way, but that was my life then.
Mhm.
And like my mom and I kind of like laugh at it in my older age, but that was DC back then.
Mm.
Like I was an anomaly. And so the whole thing of that character has been a part of my life all the time before the letters. The letters came when I, for a time, left the internet world and I had to reintroduce myself because the real world understands accreditation. They understand degrees. In the online world, you can be whatever you want to be as long as you have enough social proof to show it. And so, in coming back into the real world, I couldn't show myself as Timothy D. Craggette, the internet entrepreneur. I had to show myself as Timothy D. Craggette. And that Timothy D. Craggette was just Tim. So a part of that was, okay, if I have to live in their world, I got to play by their rules. And that's where a lot of the degree stuff came in. Part of it was that, but part of it was actually a family related thing where I lost my father-in-law early, and we had a share of music.
Mm.
And so my first degree, bachelor's of science in audio production, was my connection to music. And then it just kind of took off from there because my nature was, okay, well, I like this thing. Let me just keep going
Yeah.
and keep going. And now I'm on degree number 4.
So, I mean, obviously, with all this education, it comes with the the philosophy of reading books. And
Yes.
obviously, you're a writer, you're an author, you've read multiple different books on this journey. I want you to kind of talk about like books that if you could read again, knowing what you know now, which would be that first book that you would pick up if you had to start over from scratch today?
Oh, the first book absolutely is The Richest Man in Babylon.
Mm,
Um, the reason I bring that book up, and I read it at least twice a year, um, is about understanding people and their talents.
mm,
That isn't the core lesson of it, but that's what I've always taken from it. One of the passages in the book talks about you don't lend your money to the sheep herder, you lend your money to the money lender. And that language translates to you don't give your money to the let's say postman. You don't give your money to the postman. You give your money to the bank teller or stock market analyst or whatever, someone that understands what that thing is supposed to do so it properly grows. Um, and I revisit that book because it keeps me in check. When you get to a point where you can almost see the good in everybody all the time without thinking about it, you forget that there's certain levels of expertise that comes with their personality or their being. Like as much as you want to help everybody, you can only help us so many people.
mm,
And that goes in reverse. And trusting someone that doesn't have the knowledge, skills, or abilities for the thing that you're trying to accomplish
mm,
puts you at a deficit. And so that's what it was for me when I read this book the first time I ever read it. And it was recommended to me by Robert G. Allen, the author of No Money Down. Um, Once he recommended that book, I bought it immediately. It took me one night. It's a very quick read, very small book, but it's a powerful book.
mm.
And it's one that I revisit to kind of keep myself in check to say, I love supporting anyone I can. I love helping anyone I can. I have to keep in mind that I can do what I can do and no more, no less. And same thing for me. Um, I don't trust my money with the sheep herder. I trust my money with the money lender.
Hmm.
So that's the book.
All right. So like spinning from that book, I mean, obviously I think your book comes into play, right? I mean, you're talking about how is it the best way to make money online? Now,
Yes.
that could have been anything, right? It could have been how to make the best money through education. It could have been how to make your money through music. Why did you dial it into online, considering that the predecessors before that are also part of your personality as well?
Uh, so the logic behind the title is written in a certain way. It's broken English, as a matter of fact. Because the way that someone would read it is how to make money online.
Mhm.
But the title is the how is the best way to make money online because it talks about the process, it talks about the system. Many books that are written on the topic of online money making focuses on some type of fad, some type of algorithm break, some type of temporary um, strategy or tactic. Systems are forever. Perfect example, Work the System. Great book. Talks about how to systematize a process.
Mm.
Um, uh, I can't remember the name of the title, but it covers the law of constraints. Um, that's a book that talks about optimizing systems.
Mhm.
And so we talked earlier about like love by repeat. That's a system. And that's a system that I instituted before I even knew it was a system from the time I first started online in 2012. So I focused on the system of doing this thing because to me, the system is the best way to achieve the result.
Mm.
And so that's the logic behind the title. And it's funny, when I tested the title, I did get that initial feedback of, well, this is written in a dumb way. I mean, it's not written right. It doesn't say the thing, da, 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 da. But that's the whole thing of creativity. It's understanding the logic behind it.
Mhm.
And certain people will either will get it, or there'll be enough people that's curious enough to understand why this doesn't make sense. It's dissonance.
Mhm.
It's confusion. It's moving somebody off kilter. And that type of pattern interrupt is why it's titled the way it is.
Hmm.
And also, to answer the online part, all that's connected with online is causing an interruption, is causing dissonance. It's moving someone to curiosity. It's AIDA. It's all those things. So the focus of online was just because that's my world.
Mhm.
I understand the online world even better than I understand the real life. So
Mhm.
yeah,
So I want you to time travel here for a minute, right? And
sure.
let's say it's an opportunity for you to talk to someone, not yourself. Let's say someone else is moving to Florida in 1989, like a 11-year-old kid, right? And his 11-year-old kid starts getting into the internet and he starts looking at things, and then he grows up and maybe he's 16, 17 years old right now. And he's like, okay, I want to make some money online. I think that I can do this. I think I want to go into the education space, much like what you've done.
Yeah.
Words of wisdom would you give to that individual to help them to make that goal a reality?
Mario Brown gave me the best wisdom I've ever had in life, and that's taking perfect action. Um, One of the things that I like to instill in kids that I get to mentor during the summer is you don't have to have things to be perfect in order to be successful. You just
Mm.
got to start. Um, I even express this in the book, um, that as long as you have a version 1.0, you can make a version 1.5. And that has been like one of the strongest things that's ever carried me through. And I give that information, not information, I give that advice almost all the time when someone asks me something similar to this, to just take imperfect action. Like, you don't need to know everything. You don't need to have everything. Everything you could ever possibly need or have is at your disposal. It's a matter of asking the right questions to the right people at the right time. And if you don't know what the right question is, you ask, who is the person that can da 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 da. More than likely, someone knows someone that can move you forward, taking perfect action. That would be my advice, hands down.
They're listening right now and they're saying, okay, I'm planning on taking perfect action, but I need your help. I need your guidance. I at least want to get some more information from you. Where can we send them?
Right now, um, my company, NASB, the National Association for the Advancement of Small Business Innovation, we have a mastermind. It's an open mastermind. And people don't have to be a member of NASB in order to be a part of it. There's a great number of people that's in there that's willing to share information, including myself. And the whole idea is community of learning, another aspect of education. Um, Community of learning is where people openly share, for the embetterment of everyone involved. And anyone can join that, by going to nasb.org, /starts. That's NAASBI.org /start, START. And it's just a couple of questions. It's just understanding, who you are, what's your ambition. And then the room is open. One thing I could say about that, that's another part of my journey to kind of tie it all in, is During my years of being online, it's always been about getting the door open because you don't know who's inside the room. You don't know which person has which resource, which connection, um, is looking to help, is looking to do something, to better someone else. You just don't know. The hardest part is just getting that door open so you can just step in. And that's what we try to do. So NASB.org/start, that community is made for anyone who has an interest in growth.
Very cool. So this next question, I will say it's kind of like a fun question. It's an intuitive question. And I think for you, like there's so many different people that came across your life path to make you who you are, but there's probably some other people that maybe you wanted to meet in your journey. So you have opportunity to spend 24 hours with anyone. This person could be dead or alive, someone that you've met, someone that you've never met. Who would this person be that you would like to spend 24 hours with, and why?
Mm. Hmm. Man, there's so many people. If I had to pick one, hmm, man, that's so tough. All right, I'm gonna go with my first answer, my gut answer, because I'm overthinking this now. Steve Jobs.
Mm.
And the reason I would want to pick his brain is part of the reason why NASB exists. And that's the core word is innovation. So he comes to mind. The reason Steve Jobs comes to mind for me is because growing up in the 80s and 90s, where computers started to become a thing, there had to be some type of disruption, some type of conduit of change that was transcendent. And the company Apple is a transcendent company, but it started with the idea of disruption. Something had to give. And through that, it's affected many different industries, including my favorite one, which is the art industry. That's it's STEAM, it's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Um, I would love to understand his thought process on innovation.
Mm.
For me, what I grabbed from his book, what I grabbed from watching just about every single Apple presser, is taking something that already exists, adding some type of tweak to it to give it a new feature or benefit that maximizes the potential of what that thing originally was.
Mm.
I would love to pick his brain on his process of how he thought about that through technology, through culture. And the Steve Jobs that I would want to talk to is the later in life Steve Jobs. Just to clarify.
Post asshole Steve Jobs.
Yes. The post we had to hire someone from Pepsi to come in and do your job, Steve Jobs. Because I think as he was getting closer to the end of his life, there was a more spiritual aspect to him where he started to encapsulate his humanity.
Mm.
And at that point, I would love to pick that version of Steve Jobs
Mm.
because to me, that version of Steve Jobs was more than a capitalist. He was a human.
Mm.
At least that was the appearance. That's who I would want to talk to.
I wouldn't even say he was a human. I mean, I would think like he was at the stage of life to where he became the owl. He became your brand because again, everything before it was leading up to that moment to make him aware of being human. Because before he didn't really care about
No.
oh. So if you had an opportunity, right, to talk about your greatest achievement, and let's say with technology advancing with AI, you had an opportunity to bring your grandmother back in some shape or some form.
Ooh,
And you
okay.
talk to her, right? And kind of fill her in. Like, the past 10 years since you've been gone, this is my greatest achievement. What would that achievement be?
Staying alive.
Wow.
The hardest thing for any person is losing your rock.
Mhm.
And I now consider her my guardian angel. I have a tattoo on my right arm. It's a tree of knowledge. It has a banner that says knowledge is power. Like, I live this. But around each part of my tattoo is a cardinal.
Mm.
And the cardinal on top symbolizes my grandmother. In England, the superstition is that when you see a cardinal, that's a loved one visiting you. And where I live, I see cardinals like dipping and diving everywhere. And outside of my window, there's this nice berry tree where the cardinals like to kind of set up shop. At certain points, I can just look out my window, and I swear, it's like, I lied to you not, I will see a cardinal looking dead in the window at me. If we had to apply technology to that, the conversation would be about just being alive to keep going.
Mm.
That's the accomplishment.
Yeah, that's definitely powerful. I mean, it's one of those things to where the spiritual aspect of what you said, but the intellectual aspect of what you said, and it's kind of like trying to balance that reality is like, that's something that, like, going through grief is something that's hard enough.
Very much so.
But talking about just staying alive is not even about the capital achievement. It's not even about the education achievement. It's not even about you becoming a doctor. It's just about post her life, you being alive. That's definitely powerful.
Thank you.
Powerful.
Yeah. For anyone that's ever lost a loved one, that's been their largely influential person. Um, you question a lot of the purpose of life. You question your place. And I remember, and this is going super deep. I remember in the last year of her life where we got the blessing of taking care of her. Her and I, in a very quiet moment, had a conversation because our birthdays were our days apart. And I was going through a really rough time. I didn't know that I wanted to stick around. And we just had a real conversation, grandmother to grandson. And she's like, no, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep doing this. You gotta stick around. So we made a pact.
Mm.
And the pact was, if you stick around for your birthday, I'll stick around past mine. She did that. She made it to her 80, I want to say 83rd, maybe 83rd, 84th birthday. And then I made it to my 35. And then she passed the following January. So in that, I'm still here.
And you're doing your damn thing at that as well. So I mean, it's not like you're just staying here and just being a pillar. You're like, you're being a multiple pillar to multiple different individuals in multiple different categories and multiple different industries, all at the same time.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So going into closing, man, I like to give whoever I'm interviewing opportunity to become the host of Boss Uncaged. I mean, you're a podcaster, you're a radio guy, so everything that you're about to do is going to be completely natural to you.
All right, let's do this.
I'm now your guest. So do you have any questions for me?
Sure. So, welcome to Boss Uncaged. I am Timothy D. Craggette, and thank you so much for. No, I'm playing. All right. No. So, my question for you, and I asked this of all of my media personalities. What was the one driving force for you to say that this medium of audio and video was the medium for you to be fully expressed? And what has it done for you emotionally, logically, that has impacted your life and the life of others?
I mean, there's so much to unpack, so many different layers in an onion. It's kind of like looking like a onion blossom if you're going to a restaurant, right? And it's I could pull any one of those, and it's so much flavor and it's so rich. But I think all of this podcast stuff really stemmed from me having a near-death experience, and I had a stroke. And coming out from that stroke,
Dude, we are too much alike.
like I said, we're either in a simulation and they ran out of like variables and they put similar
Oh,
people in the equation, right?
oh my goodness. Go ahead.
Yeah. So post that, I kind of just, woke up in it. My girlfriend at the time, who's my wife, the fact that she stood by my side and she was there and she gave me advice and she was just kind of like, maybe it's time for you. Cause I was a marketer and I was a designer and I was I was all these different things for so long, growing multiple different businesses. And she said, like, you're a brand guy. Why don't you rebrand yourself?
Mm.
And I was just like, damn. Well, first of all, I got to marry you because that's the real thing, right?
Right,
And
right.
then second to that was, yeah, if I was my own client, what would my rebrand look like? And my other company, the name was never necessarily branded with the psychology of being easy or stimulating some kind of emotional. So I did that. So Boss Uncaged was a byproduct of that. I wanted it to be something simple that a 5-year-old could pretty much sound out and spell, but at the
Nice.
same time, a business owner or someone that's working for corporate America could look at Boss Uncaged and their eyebrows will go up and they'll start to process. They already know the definition of both words, but to play on both words together, what does that mean to them? And then applying the podcasting and the video aspect just made it real. It made it real to where I could have these conversations. I can dig really, really deep in things that as interviewers that you may not think that I would have that content. Prime example, like your grandmother. Like I really was diving down. I was like, I wish I could have found more information about her once I found out about her, if that makes sense.
It
And
does.
I kept on digging and looking and looking and looking. So I was like, wait, what does that look like at scale? Can I do that for other people? So then I started interviewing people, started interviewing the people of my people, their Rolodex, my Rolodex. And then got to the point to where, okay, now we're on global aspect. How do I do that at scale and still give this level of dedication to each individual? So like, that's my passion. That's my drive. But to give back, I think I give back a little bit of a unique experience, giving that much detail in my data sourcing. So that way, this is the first time you and I've had a conversation, but I guarantee if you and I were to meet in person, that bond from this podcast will be uniquely different
Absolutely, it would.
than
Yeah.
doing the generic BS questions.
I love it. So, my interview style is more akin to Larry King.
Mm.
I tend to focus on the moment because a moment in time encapsulated is a moment that will never be repeated or replicated. But what you've done is straight up journalism. So my question for you is, do you ever feel that there is something you didn't catch that you just love to bring into an interview when you go back and you listen and you hear some of the responses that comes from your guest? How does it make you analyze your efforts?
For me, it's one of the reasons why I took Boss Uncaged from a podcast to a network. Prime example, we talked about your book, we talked about other books. The next step in this process to continue the network and continue the system is to then have an interview about you and your book, right? So that now I can have the book. In addition to that, we have a food podcast, right? We didn't even talk about food on this one, but I guarantee that you and I can go in, talk about roti,
Yes.
bus up shop,
Yep.
curry,
I was thinking the same thing.
all day long.
All day.
And so, like, think about it. Like, now we have 3 different segmentations of our personalities and our ecosystems. So I always try to like piggyback the next interview process as part of that strategy to uncover who that person is. Because again, if you're limited to an hour, or even with Joe Rogan's 3 hour, he still can't unpack everything in those.
Exactly.
So you have to kind of segment it. So for me, it's the person, it's the boss, it's the books, the information, it's the food, it's like there's so many different things we could talk about, but ideally I'm going to keep building the more and more I find the overlapping of the circles. And what I found so far with all entrepreneurs I've interviewed, 99% of them, they have a founding story.
Yep.
They've read some type of book, and 9 out of 10 of them, like,
they've had a meal.
Yeah, they had a meal, right? So, and then second to that would be travel. I mean, a lot of us, we love to travel. So that would kind of be like the next generation and then when I have all 4 of those, like, think about the collective data that we would share in those 4 podcasts.
I love it. I was just thinking about that as like with my marketing hat on. I was like, all the data points in that is just amazing. I love it. Last question I'll leave you with. I'm gonna give you a hypothetical since you gave me one. Okay. I'm gonna give you 2. One that's gonna throw you off. One that's on topic. One that's gonna throw you off. So the on topic one. I'm intrigued of who you would sit with if you had 24 hours with a person, top 5 dead or alive. So if you could pick one person, dead or alive, 24 hours, completely uninterrupted, who would you choose and why?
I've had that question asked, and obviously based upon the time, the day, the week, the answer shifts, right?
Yes.
But I think right now, of where we are in technology, where we are within physics, science, like, there's so much other things that on a higher level of intellect that we can possibly conceive and think about. And there's only one person that I know that can unpack that information very transparently, very layman, and it'll be Neil deGrasse. Like, I would love, I would, I'm not going to say I'm going to kidnap this man, but I would love to have this man for 24 hours. And we had an opportunity to see him at the Fox and see him live, and just hearing the way and again, like, he's also African-American, right? He knows who he is. He's very self-aware, but he does not care. And he says it so matter-of-factly, like, there's right and there's wrong. There's binary, there's on and off. And he is so direct with his information. If 24 hours with him would be like a lifetime of experience with other people that you may or may not get the same value from.
I love it. And this is my last question. This question is what we used to ask on my old podcast with my friends, the Rachel and Rob Presents podcast of Blurred and Geek Culture. So this would be the question we would ask people, and I would love to get your answer to it. In a dark alley at night, who wins this fight? Batman or Superman?
In a dark alley
at night,
who would win this fight? And there's no other variables as far as like technology or the fact that one of them didn't
include any of that stuff. So this is your answer.
Wow. I think it's a difficult task, because again, my logical side would say Superman, because again, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's light or dark. It's Superman, right? I mean, he can pretty much see through. But being that it's Batman, he's intellectual, he would come hella prepared for that fight. Whether it's wearing, green collars and green fists just in case the Superman tries to hit him, he gets a little taste of the kryptonite. So I hate to say it, but I would side with the logic of information and go with Batman.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Tim's questions. So thank you for giving me the platform to ask that, SA.
No. I definitely appreciate it, man. And I think, obviously, I don't think this is going to be the last interview. I'm definitely looking forward to unpacking your book some more. I would love to have you on the book podcast. I think there's so much information in your book that we can kind of really segment and really give the listeners like something not only to think about, but something to take action on.
Absolutely. And I'd love to have that conversation. Um, just kind of giving people a little bit of a taste. Um, the way that the book is designed is instructionally sound. So that whole education background we kept talking about is like a part of the foundation of the book. So it's more than just a read. It's that result. You will get a result if you go through the book. So I look forward to having that conversation.
Great, great. So, and I got one last question for you in closing. If out of all the colors you could have picked, and I understand you understand color theory probably better than most,
Thank
why
you.
did you go with the gold and black?
White, black, and gold. So the color combination, outside of many of the fraternities that are out there that use the same color scheme and things like that, I went with oh, and I hate to say it because it's going to sound so technical and geeky. Um, I went with um, accessibility.
Mhm.
So, in my world of universal design learning, you try to make learning accessible for every single person, which means part of that is also understanding color. For those that may be colorblind,
Mm.
um, you want to use high contrast colors to make text and images legible. So the combination of white, black, and gold, um, it's so much high contrast in that combination that I went with that. But the gold is probably the most symbolic color because it is the color of wealth. And I use it in the terms of wealth of knowledge. So that was my super metaphysical thought process behind it. It first started off with I need to make sure people that this whole thing is accessible to anyone. And then I had to have an anchor color. That anchor color was gold. And that was also lending into wisdom.
Oh, well, like I said, I could ask you questions all day. We could end up like Joe Rogan and be on here for like half a day. But I mean, with that, I mean, I think going back to your nickname of being the Swift Doctor Boss, I think that there's so many nuances and play on those words. So that I think you definitely lived up to it. I definitely appreciate you being here. I think you delivered so much insightful information for someone to kind of really stop and re-listen to it. And this is one of those episodes to where 20 years can go by and you listen to it 20 years before and you listen to it 20 years later, you would get a different value add based upon where you are in life.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so, so much.
Great. With that, SA Grant, over and out.
How you doing, guys? Timothy D. Craggette here, and I wanted to give my testimonial for Boss Uncaged. I just did this interview, and as a media personality, I love it, love it, love it, love it when people go deep and they do the work and bring out the best in their interviewees. Like SA just like killed it for me. It made me reassess life, how good this dude is. You have a chance to listen to the show, have a chance to watch the show, I highly recommend it. Not just because I'm instantly a fan, but coming from a journalistic standpoint, SA puts in the work to make sure that you get the best out of the people he brings on. So, Boss Uncaged, it's one of the best things that I've done in recent years, and I'm so happy to be a part of the legacy of the show. So please listen, watch, subscribe, alert buttons, whatever it is, do it all because this man's bringing it, and I'm so thankful that I've been a part of this experiment called podcasting with SA. So yes, testimonial, do the thing, hit like, check whatever, just do it.